I'm James Reed, freestyle fighter coming from Liverpool, and you're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast.
You're listening to Stu's Wrestling Podcast. It's time for British Wrestling's sharpshooter, your host, Stu Palmer.
We are back for episode 94 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast, and my guest today is the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff. Nikita is a two-time Hall of Famer. He was inducted into the Luther's Hall of Fame and the NWA Hall of Fame in 2008. He found Christ in the early 90s. He is the founder of Koloff for Christ Ministries. You can find out all about that on koloff.net. So off the back of wrestling, he's gone in to do that, and he's had some great success. He's visited 30 countries and 50 states in America with the ministry. They have Man Camp, which he does with Lex Luger. You'll get to hear all about that. He has the Man Up podcast. He's had Sting on the show for 2 parts, which I recommend you listen to. I've listened to both parts of that. Fantastic. So we talk about the Man Up podcast, which he's been doing, and we also talk about his wrestling career coming from Minnesota, from the famous Robbinsdale area, where so many of the guys at top level in pro wrestling came through. So he talks about that. There's just so much that we get to cover. I was a huge fan of his in the early 90s as a kid. So an absolute honour and a privilege to get the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff, on the show for episode 94 of Stu's Wrestling Podcast. Enjoy. My guest all the way from North Carolina is former Jim Crockett Promotions, NWA, WCW talent, Nikita Koloff, and also the founder, I'm going to get this right now, for Christ Ministries, the leader of that Koloff Christ Ministries, which was founded in 2002. And I was a massive, massive fan of yours. I started watching wrestling in 1990. So we used to get WCW Worldwide here in the UK. And I remember fondly you in the singlet and doing what you used to do best, man. So yeah, I was a big fan as a kid. It wasn't just the Stinger for me when it was
I appreciate it, Stu. Great to be with you. And of course, I have more roots to the UK than I do to Russia, but we can talk about that. But I know there are a lot of Sting fans out there, but I appreciate you being a fan of the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff.
How was it going, being such a prominent heel in the faction, as the Russian Nightmare when you came through, then going in as becoming a face? How was that for you transitioning back in the days?
I mean, it was different. I'm thankful, Stu, that I had the opportunity to be on both sides and to experience, both sides of it. Sometimes I get asked which one was more fun, but I don't know if one was more fun than the other. Really, they were both kind of you might say an equal experience. Fun in and of their own way. They were both fun, but and that transition to go from literally at one point being voted one of the most hated in wrestling to then becoming one of the most favorable favorites in wrestling was just a lot of fun.
How were the crowds when you were heel? Being that the Russian, the Cold War and all that. How were the fans with you? Did it get a bit hot? Did it get a bit tasty in there at times?
Yeah, it did actually. I mean, it was not hard. Uncle Ivan and I, it was not hard to get the fans chanting USA, USA, USA. And 6 different times, the very first time being the Great American Bash, 1985 against the Nature Boy Ric Flair, the very first of 6 different times that fans came over the barricade and attempted to get in the ring. Now, that very first one, the guy got in there and got his hands on me because I wasn't expecting it. But from that point on, Stu, I had my antennas up. And so the following 5 attempts, I was able to see it coming.
What happened in the other 5 times? Did you have to get physical?
With one. Well, 4 of the 5, no. The security kind of cut them off before they could get there. One guy in Norfolk, Virginia, actually I was wrestling Magnum TA, close to his hometown, and saw him coming and put the boots to him a few times, and ended up I always carried that chain with me, and he kept getting up. Every time I put the boots to him, he got back up. Finally, I'm like, Uncle, I had Uncle Ivan and Baron Von Raschke in the ring with me, and between the three of us, we finally put him down.
It was just, people took it literally, didn't they, back then? That's just how it was. Crazy. It
was. I mean, as people have told me over and over and over again, my persona, right, the Russian Nightmare, they bought hook, line, and sinker, if you will, and so, they just even years later, I hear those stories of like, dude, I really believed you were from Russia, man. You had me. The 10, 11, 12, 15-year-old kid in me, you had me,
Who pitched for you to, play that gimmick? Was it Jim Crockett at the time, or was it somebody on the creative end?
Well, actually, and it's interesting, the creative end then was different than it is now, right? Now, they got these creative writers who write all the matches and scripts and interviews and all that. Back in those days, it was a promoter and what they call a booker, right? And so that was your creative team, if you will. The booker usually worked in the business, right? And but actually, the credit goes to Sergeant Slaughter and Don Kernodle. Don Kernodle was Ivan Koloff's partner when I broke in. They were the NWA World Tag Team Champions. Slaughter and Kernodle get the credit for coming up with the idea of a nephew for Ivan, and then Kernodle gets the credit of reaching out to Road Warrior Animal and saying, "Hey, do you know any big guys who wouldn't mind shaving their head and becoming a Russian?" And Animal goes, "I know the guy right now," and that's how Nikita Koloff came to be.
What were some of your favourite matches in that span from 84 to 92? Some maybe off the top of your head, some of the ones that you can remember.
My goodness, Stu, there's so many good ones, y'all. I mentioned the Great American Bash, my first ever match against Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight Title. I mean, I was only 13 months into the business. I'm already World Tag Team Champion, World Six-Man Champion. Now I'm wrestling him. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the chain matches against the Road Warriors. Matches against Sting, both against Sting and then a part of Sting's squadron with the War Games.
Yeah.
But the original War Games, the Superpowers and the Road Warriors against the Four Horsemen, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Ravishing Rick Rude, Stone Cold Steve Austin. It just go right down to the Toto package, Lex Luger for the U.S. title, Magnum TA for the Best of 7 series. Gosh, there's so many good ones, dude.
I know that's putting you on the spot. But
it's good though. But yeah, there's just a handful of the memorable matches.
How was it? It's a bit of an obvious thing to ask you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How was it 13 months in, getting in there with Ric Flair at the time? What was running through your mind? Was there a lot of pressure on your end?
Yeah, I would say yes, because I'm just 13 months. I'm still learning. I'm still green. For those who don't know the story, they can read, if they want to read the whole story. In fact, I just updated my last book, Nikita, A Tale of the Ring and Redemption. I added about 7 or 8 new chapters, some more pictures. That's got my whole story in there. But to be in the ring with Ric Flair at 13 months into the business with no amateur wrestling background and no professional training was certainly pressure-packed. Fortunately, a guy like Rick, who is the consummate professional, was able to carry me through the match, and it was the opportunity for me to learn at an accelerated rate being in a ring with a guy like him.
How was it for you when you turned face? Obviously, you came in to help Dusty. So how was that? I remember seeing clips years ago of that.
Well, yeah, even that turn, when we made the decision to go from, bad guy to good guy, heel to face, that was, again, another memorable moment, another pivotal moment for my career. I feel some have mixed emotions on whether that was good or bad, but had Magnum never had his car wreck, never had the accident, I honestly don't know that I might have ever become a good guy. I mean, he was being groomed to be the next world heavyweight champion after Flair. In fact, that he was just days away from flying to New York and kind of sealing that deal prior to his wreck. So when I think back on that night, I mean, and many have said, in fact, Tony Schiavone, I understand one time was asked, what was the loudest, pop in an arena or something of that nature? And from what I understand, he said the night Nikita Koloff turned babyface and the superpowers were formed, that night was the loudest pop he had ever heard in an arena.
That's high praise indeed, isn't it, from Mr. Schiavone?
Yeah.
All the matches
Yes.
called, and that's incredible.
Yes, sir.
I need to ask. There was something in the water in Minnesota, because how many guys came through? I know it's been asked. I've got to ask it. I want to get your perspective on that. It's just firing off the names. Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, the Road Warriors, John Nord. A lot of people leave John Nord out. Barry Darso, all them guys. I'm missing a few there as well.
Well, what's even more amazing, I joke and I say it was the minerals in the water tower, especially in Robbinsdale, Minnesota. Now, a lot of the guys, Tom Zink, Mike Enos, Wayne Bloom, Scott Norton, obviously Jesse Ventura. I mean, there were a lot. If you want to go way back, Vern Gagne, Mean Gene Okerlund, even though he wasn't a wrestler. Even more interesting, Stu, is nine of us all came from what is called Robbinsdale High School.
Yeah.
One high school. Now, a lot of those guys we named came from the Twin Cities, outside of, part of Minneapolis, St. Paul. But just from Robbinsdale High School, you named it, Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, Barry Darso, Tom Zink, Brady Boone, Nikita Koloff, John Nord, and several of us all played on American football as we know it. I know football is different over there in the UK. That's right. Yeah. But 7 of us from the same high school. Well, I say 9 technically, because me and Gene Okerlund and Vern Gagne also were graduates of Robbinsdale High School. Now, years prior, but they were still from Robbinsdale. So had to be the minerals in the water with all those lakes in Minnesota, Stu.
I will never see the likes of it again either. That roll call of people. It'll never.
Right.
It's incredible to me. It's just incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yep.
I think it's time to move on to Koloff Ministries. I'd be remiss not to ask about that. You starting that up. I know you've traveled 50 states, 30 countries as well when I was doing my research. How has it been, doing that? I'm sure there's been some fantastic memories since 2002, Nikita.
Well, it is. Yeah, it is. It really even kind of goes back further than that. That's when we, Koloff for Christ Ministries is actually formed in 1998. 5 years prior to that, in 1993, which is about 11 months, officially about 11 months after I left wrestling. I walked away from wrestling under my own terms. Wasn't forced out. Injury didn't force me out. I chose to walk away at age 33. That was a goal of mine. Actually, when I broke in, I told Ivan and Don, hey, I'll be out of active wrestling by the time I'm 35. And so that choice, I made that choice to do that, little knowing 11 months later, I would find myself at an altar, surrendering my life to the Lord. Now, I didn't, just like I didn't grow up in Russia, Stu. I also didn't grow up in church, but that didn't mean I didn't, know the story of the man Jesus and, died on a cross. And so I knew the story, but I just say on 17 October 1993, that story made the trip from my head down to my heart, and everything changed for me. And so I began a brand new journey and a new mission, if you will, a brand new calling on my life. And so we launched Koloff for Christ Ministries was formed, and now you fast forward all these years later, and you're right, I've traveled to all 50 states and 30 countries so far. Last year launched a radio show called The Man Up Show and a podcast of my own that's now been downloaded in 52 different countries. And I'm getting ready to launch a TV version of that on Morningstar TV. And so, to be able to do all these things, I mentioned Lex Luger and being an opponent in the ring, but now him and I, we co-facilitate. In fact, I'm wearing the shirt today, Man Camp. He and I co-facilitate a camp for men. We bring a small group of men into the state of Georgia in a little town called Royston. And our goal is to teach, train, equip, and deploy men, to be godly husbands, godly fathers, to be a manly man, but also to be a godly man. So, we do these conferences and these camps and talk about masculinity and manhood and some things we just feel are much needed in today's world. And so I feel fortunate. Never in a million years would I mentioned the one book, but I've written 3 books. I mean, I'm doing things, Stu, that I never dreamed I would in a million years. And the professional wrestling side of it, I'll say this real quick. The professional wrestling side of it, I look back on my career and I feel like it was training ground for the ultimate call of my life. Because here's what I mean by that. In wrestling, I flew on airplanes, I rented cars, I stayed in hotels, I talked on microphones in front of cameras. I entertained crowds for a living. When I look back at the last 28 plus years with ministry, I fly on airplanes, I rent cars, I stay in hotels, I talk on microphones in front of cameras, and it's not to entertain crowds, but it's bring the gospel message. But that said, all of that, I feel like my wrestling career, I'm very grateful for it, thankful for it, but it was almost like a training ground for the ministry. It's just amazing. It just blows my mind.
That's awesome with the Man Camp as well, and doing that with Lex. I know I've never managed to I've been to signings where Lex has been, but I've been queuing for other people. If I get to the States again, I've got to meet Lex. He's on my list.
In fact, he literally, I'll go ahead and tell you that he literally, I got my phone here, right? He literally just tried to call me while we're doing this interview. So his ears must be burning, because we're talking about it. Right? You'll love meeting Lex. He's a phenomenal guy. You'll love meeting him.
I've got to get back over to the States. I love WrestleCon.
Yes, sir.
I love WrestleCon when I've been, but yeah. No, I don't want to make this just about wrestling. Also, like you touched upon the fact about the Man Up podcast, which is set up in 2019. What have you been doing with that? What sort of stuff have you been producing? Yeah,
it's a fun format. Give you a handful of examples. It's really kind of conversational. So when people go on and listen to it, it's conversation. It airs on. It's called Truth Radio Network. It's based in Winston-Salem. Stu Epperson Jr. is the owner. So it goes out on the airwaves on weekends first, and then it's uploaded on all the podcast platforms around the world. And it's conversational, and the idea is to have a variety of guests on there to interview. So, for example, recently I had a guy named Brad Johnson who won the Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Bucks back in with John Gruden back in maybe the 90s. I should know when he won the Super Bowl, but Brad Johnson. I had Homer Lee Gibbons Jr., which was a world boxing champion trained by Evander Holyfield. Just had a conversation yesterday with Kevin Sorbo, who played Hercules in the TV series Hercules. And he's going to come on the podcast sometime in the future. But I also have not just celebrities and athletes. I mean, of course, I've had Lex. I've had Sting on for a 2-part interview, Magnum TA, Jackson Riker, who's on Monday Night Raw, WWE. Mm-hmm. So I've had Jackson on, Lodi, who was part of Raven's Flock back in the 90s with WCW. So I got celebrities, I've got athletes, but I also bring on like businessmen and sometimes husbands and wives who maybe work together. So I'll bring them on. I'll also bring on, people in different types of ministries just to, talk with them. There's so many fascinating stories out there, Stu, that I just want to get their story out there for others to hear. And the objective behind the Man Up Show, and we have a lot of women listen to it, by the way, but the objective is really to encourage and inspire others, right? And since launching it, tell you this real quick, we added a new segment called Q&A with Koloff, and that's where I literally will call somebody, a fan per se, and have a 10, 15-minute conversation, flip the tables, and instead of me asking all the questions, they get to ask me some questions. And so that's pretty fun. And most recently, we're going to launch what's called the Man Up Minute, which is literally a 60-second motivational, inspirational little thought-provoking minute that'll air on all at Truth Radio Network. And somebody's on their drive time, they're like, I hadn't thought about that before. So something that's just very thought-provoking. And then last but not least, we're getting ready. In fact, I finished this interview with you. I got to sit down with the media guy from Morningstar Ministries, and we're going to launch on their TV network, which is an international network, internet-based. But we're going to launch the Man Up Show television version of it. So excited about that. You're one of the first to hear about that, Stu, just so you know.
Thank you for that, premiering that piece of information, expanding with it as you go.
Yes.
On. Brilliant. Yeah. Do you know what? Just going back to me, obviously doing this since 2019, there's nothing better than seeing a load of countries that have streamed an episode. I find it amazing. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah. No, I absolutely. And again, when I think about, what I get the privilege of doing, like I say, it just kind of blows my mind. And I want to say this because I mentioned it at the top of the hour, about having more roots in England than I do in Russia. And you may or may not know this. However, my mom was born up outside of the little town called Carlisle, up on the Scottish border. Yeah. At a little village called Hayden. And just a few years ago, my sister, brother, and I took a trip over to London and a trip over to England to, we toured all over London, and then we took the rails up to Carlisle, got a rental car, and drove all over, looking for ancestors there in all the little villages, and we found, Stu, we didn't expect this. We found the house that my mom was born in.
Wow.
That's
amazing.
It is. She was born in 1919, and then my grandma, her mom, brought her over on a boat in 1921 when she was 2 years old. And so she never got to go back to England, but we wanted to go back to just kind of honor her, when she passed.
I think Carlisle, from where I am, I'm in Wales, on the North Wales coast. It's about 3.5 hours, I would say, maybe 4 hours away from here. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. As I recall, I want to say it was about a 3-hour train ride, 3+ hour train ride from London up there. But man, beautiful country. We loved it. We loved touring all those little villages. And so I have roots in England. I'm just saying. And Hey, a side note. Now, which team are you sporting right there? What team are you sporting?
I'm Everton. Obviously, we've got Liverpool, haven't we? Which is universally known. Everton aren't bad. We've got a billionaire owner. But yeah, I'm an Evertonian. We've actually got Liverpool's former manager, Rafa Benitez, now, which some of the fans were a bit half and half because he made comments years ago. But I cross fingers, he's going to do us proud this season.
Well, good. Well, hey, now don't hold this against me or Lex, but both of us are Manchester U fans. I'm just saying.
How do you think? What do you think with the signings? They've done some good business. They've done some good business this summer. So
yeah, I mean, well, we're Manchester United fans, but all that to say, we're just fans. We're just fans of the sport and just enjoy a good match, and so yeah. But we have that too. We're football fans there.
Nikita, I'm going to get back to wrestling. I'm going to ask: Have you got some funny road stories? Because so many hours you guys, on the road doing what you do. As fans, we couldn't comprehend, the stories of the road like that you've been on. So yeah, just some road stories with the guys that you can remember fondly.
I mean, it's the business back then, and I don't know what it's like. I don't think I'm pretty certain they don't work nearly the way we did back then. And what I mean by that is, in 1986, for example, put in perspective, I had 454 matches that one year. Okay. So you do the math on that, there's only 365 days in a year, right? So it was pretty grueling. Not that we didn't have fun, but it was pretty grueling. You just kind of get in a groove, you might say get in a grind. And just go from town to town. I mean, those early days when I first broke in 1984, we used to average about 2,000, 2,500 miles a week. I don't know what that translates into kilometers, but it's a lot, right? So we used to have a lot of road miles, and then you combine, once we went on the superstation, we started flying, then you add the air miles, and so we were probably more exhausted than anything else, but we had a job to do. But we had fun. Most of my fun was in the ring, entertaining people for a living. Outside of the ring, there were some guys known to be more jokesters than others. Rick Steiner comes to mind. He was one of the bigger jokesters. And he didn't mess with Rick because he had an amateur wrestling background, and he could mess you up if he wanted to, But we do some, and I just think of like when Dusty and I were traveling together, just really some of the conversations we had about life and just getting to know him on a personal level outside of the ring and the professional side of things. Those are some of the more fond memories that I can, when I think back on it, that initially come to mind. Just think Ivan and I mean, we roomed together back in the day. We exclusively, him and I and Kernodle, him and I and Darso, or as we knew, Crusher Khrushchev. We'd I think back on those days of just traveling over the road, the late nights, getting home and in the gym. We'd have fun working out in the gym. So those are, although that, for your audience aren't necessarily some of the more entertaining stories, but those are some of the more memories I have.
That's nice. That's nice. I want to ask you, you were saying about 400 plus matches that year. How were you mentally? You're saying about the strains of the road and the tiredness. How were you mentally? Did it affect you, that schedule?
Well, you kind of really get in a groove, and so a routine, if you will. And so for me back in those days, working out was a priority, and so my days would consist of exercise in the gym, usually a couple hours in the gym, and timing that to where, I could still, get ready, prepared for whether we had a 300-mile road trip or a 100-mile road trip, and knowing what time we were going to all meet up, jump in one car, drive to the arena, have our match and entertain the fans, and then drive back home and really go through that same routine the next day. If you were a family man, wrestling was very difficult, very tough on a family, because the guy's gone a lot, and if we flew to a town, like we might fly to Detroit, Michigan, and rent a car, and we might have a match one night in Saginaw, another night in Lansing, Michigan, another night in Battle Creek, end up in Detroit for the final night, and then fly back to Charlotte, and then drive for 5 or 6 days somewhere. So that was not uncommon. So you just had to have a mindset and understand what the grind looked like.
That's why I respect you guys so much. That what you had to do, being away from your family. I come home to my wife every night. But yeah, I can only imagine. That'd be tough. I'd find that tough if I was in your shoes.
Yeah, it was challenging, but again, we made it fun. I mean, we had fun. I will tell you one quick story I remember on Rick. Again, go back to Rick Steiner. He liked to play. I don't know if you know. I guess you know what bumper cars over there, right? And amusement parks all have the bumper cars. Yeah. Well, Rick enjoyed doing that on the interstate at 80 miles an hour. I mean, you might be like, no, for real. Like, you might be driving all the way. If you're not paying attention, it was not uncommon for him for all of a sudden your car to jerk on the interstate, and you're like, what's going on? You look in the rearview mirror, and you see Rick Steiner, who just give you a little nudge, and he with that little laugh, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, just one that just popped in my head, thinking about Steiner being a practical jokester. So there's one story for your audience.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I had heard about various stories watching shoot interviews of Rick. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that one. Who, in your mind, was an underutilized talent? I know everyone was on the platform, they got seen on TV. Was there a guy in the roster you felt could have been propelled higher but didn't get it, who was really talented?
I mean, I guess one that comes to mind, Terry Taylor, that comes to mind. I thought Terry was a phenomenal talent, a great mind for the business. I felt like he a great worker in the ring, and he and I had a unification TV title unification match at Starrcade '87 in Chicago, and I was the NWA World TV Champ. They were merging two groups together, the UWF. Crockett had bought the UWF from Bill Watts, and they were merging those two together. And so we had this unification match, he and I, and by many of the fans' accounts, I get a lot of compliments on that match. I give Terry all the credit because I just had to follow his lead, and I thought he was a great talent in the ring, and the first one that comes to mind when you say was anyone underrated, Terry would be the first one that comes to mind.
That's cool. I like asking you guys, absolutely. What about more current wrestling? Do you get time to see anything? I assume you're very busy doing everything that you do, but yeah, do you get time to see anything current? And what your thoughts on the current product in the business?
Just really, Stu, really just glimpses of it. I mean, I haven't had television or satellite or cable or any of that for 12, 13, 14 years now.
Wow.
I just don't have time for it. I just don't have time, sit down and watch a television show. I'll go to an occasional movie. I enjoy going to the movie theater. and catch an occasional movie. I'll catch glimpses of it on mostly on social media, and follow some of it there a little bit. Of course, when I'm out doing autograph signings, I'll be doing in September, I'll be doing a Comic-Con in Lexington, Kentucky. I'll be doing an autograph signing in Rock Hill, South Carolina. So I'm engaged and involved that way. And so I hear a little bit from the fans, here and there. I've got a team that I christened the Koloff Dynasty. I call it Alex and Neil Koloff. Just christened them with the Koloff name. Been grooming these guys for a couple years. We'll see if that materializes into anything, but we've done a handful of matches. In fact, I had them in a match last year against the Rock and Roll Express.
Wow!
Believe it or not,
incredible. Yeah, I'd seen a photo with you and the two guys. Yeah, in question.
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So that may get some traction, and we, more than anything, I'm not doing that to launch into a second career for Nikita Koloff. More than anything, I'm doing that for Alexander and Neil. They've been in the business for 15, 20 years, and want one final run, if you will, for their career. And so and they're great talents, or I wouldn't have christened them with the Koloff name. And for your audience there, the Koloff name goes back to the 1930s. There was Dan Koloff, who was originally from Bulgaria but wrestled as Dan Koloff. And then along comes Ivan Koloff in the 60s, Nikita Koloff in the 80s. And so we're just trying to extend the Koloff name and the legacy of Koloffs. And so I say that to say, we went down for NWA Power with Billy Corgan a couple years ago. And kudos to Corgan and what he's doing with NWA Power, Cody Rhodes with the AEW.
It's like the territories again. It's brilliant. It's brilliant what they're doing.
Yeah. I think it's great. Let's face it. I don't care what it is, whether competition is, whether it's Liverpool or whoever. Competition's healthy, right? It just is. Yeah. Always has been. It always will be. So I love it. TNA, Impact, Ring of Honor, New Japan. I think it's great. I really do.
That's nice to hear. Going back to NWA Power, I remember seeing in 2019 the little advert PSA segment you did for the show. I remember that. So it was cool seeing you. Hadn't seen you for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. What was fun for me, Stu, was driving in down Techwood Drive. Brought back so many memories, because I can't tell you how many times on early Saturday morning, sometimes exhausted from the match the night before, wherever we were, whether we were in St. Louis, Missouri or Baltimore, Maryland, we had to be in Atlanta, Georgia to tape 3 hours of television for the Superstation. And driving in on Techwood. Now, the studio was on 10th and Techwood. Well, where NWA Power was filming was on 14th and Techwood. So, I mean, then to walk in the studio, now it's not the same studio, it was, larger than it was back then, but it brought back such a flood of wonderful memories. I love the studio set with that little tiny crowd.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with the big arena, but I sure love that little studio set. And so, yeah, thank you, Billy Corgan, for, giving me a taste of a memory of the past.
That was my go-to, obviously pre-COVID. They were running so hard, weren't they? And I know they're back now and it's brilliant. That was my go-to Power every week. It's just, that 45 minutes to 60-minute product, like the old days. I love the retro old school feel. I really do. I do now as they're back on,
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And so, for their following out there, and Nick Aldis, he's a UK guy, am I right?
He is. He's not outside of Norwich, city called Norwich, Kings Lynn. He's from, but yeah, trained by the Knight family. So
yep.
Yeah.
So I've been around Nick a few times and watched his work. You know, he asked me if I'm up on any of the current stuff. So I have watched some of his work, and I think the match him and Cody had was
amazing,
brilliant.
Yeah.
And Nick reminds me a lot of a kind of a modern day Flair in the sense of how he carries himself, how he dresses, and how he carries himself, and his interviews. So
I loved how he refers to the belt as Sweet Charlotte. The Jag's parked outside. It's charisma. You can't teach it.
Right. We call it an intangible. Intangible.
That's cool.
Yep.
That's cool. Nikita, I'd like you to just plug Koloff for Christ Ministries, where people can find you. Just what's happening, or what's going to be coming up, and things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. And the website, here's the easiest way, whether you want to find out about the man camp that Lex and I co-facilitate, or you want to connect, link, subscribe, download the podcast, or connect with me on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of that. My website's just simple. It's www.koloff.net. Koloff, www.koloff.net. And it's kind of a one-stop shop. There's a store there. Like 2 of my books are available. Nikita, A Tale of the Ring of Redemption, Wrestling with Success, Developing a Championship Mentality. One's inspirational, one's motivational. And so you can find, there's other things in the store there that you can find as well. Learn more about Koloff for Christ Ministries. But that's a connection point for me, koloff.net. Just go there, link with me on social media, encourage people to download, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a comment. But I just appreciate you having me on today.
It's been brilliant. A lot of people talk about Attitude Era with wrestling, 1990, that sort of era. That was my time. I think because I was so young and impressionable as a kid. I enjoyed the Attitude Era, but early 90s, and then obviously getting to see stuff in like the mid to late 80s as I grew up. Like, it's just, that was the time, I think personally. I think that was the best time in the industry.
Well, as I'm out and about, and again, I just think about my upcoming schedule, right? I'm going to be doing several more, like I do these man-up conferences, typically on Saturdays in local communities, and then a lot of times I'll stay over, I'll preach on Sunday, so I've got several of those coming up. Like I mentioned in September, the Comic-Con in Lexington, Kentucky. I'll be there for a couple days. And I love getting out with the fans and really hearing their stories now, which is why I developed the Q&A segment on the podcast, was so I could interact with the fan, give them an opportunity to ask me 2 or 3 questions, and then put that up that they could let all their friends know about and hear them on the show, and traveling still to some of the same towns I used to wrestle in, and now coming back around, for other reasons, has just been fun. I say all that to say many, many, many of the fans, to your point, Stu, many of the fans have called it the golden era of wrestling,
Absolutely.
The 80s
Absolutely.
and the early 90s, the golden era of wrestling.
Timeless. You get just the ferociousness, the crowds, what you guys were doing. It's just amazing for us as fans. And like, you as a wrestler, you got to live it. You got to live it and breathe it, man.
Well, for those who maybe some of your audience hasn't seen haven't watched a lot of that era, what I would encourage them to go back and do that. I know most of it, a lot of it, I'm sure is available on the WWE network, right? Kudos to Vince McMahon and what he's done, with his organization. If you go back and watch it, and I would encourage people, watch fan reaction, because it was so organic, the way the matches were laid out. Well, I say laid out, the way the matches unfolded. Let me just say it that way. Because understand, when we went into the ring, it was 90 to 95% of that match was spontaneous, was improv. And almost every single interview, almost 99% of every interview you watched was improv. I mean, there was no script handed to us. We rolled one interview after another. Many times we'd step into the ring, not even seeing our opponent till we got in the ring. And so that's why you see the reaction from fans was, I say, much more organic, much more real. Obviously, 6 different times guys came in the ring after me, right? And so a different era of wrestling, and one I'm thankful to be a part of, and certainly thankful for guys like you, Stu, and so many others out there all these years later who are still fans. I can't thank all of you enough.
It's
like,
an honor.
for real.
It's an honor for me. I thank you so much for sparing the time coming on. I really, really do. I've had various guys from WCW, WWF. It's just amazing. If you'd have told me this a few years ago, who I would have had on, I would have laughed. I would have laughed in your face, probably.
Yeah, no, I can't tell you how many times I've had that. Like, I've been out to lunch or dinner, or a lot of the churches I'm in, Stu, are pastors who grew up watching wrestling, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, man, like what you just said, they're like, man, if somebody would have told me 20 years ago, I'd be, sitting having lunch with Nikita Koloff, it's crazy. But I like to say it's just one of the ways God works, and likes to just bless people in that fashion, to do the unexpected. And so here we are, and again, just grateful to be on your show, and thank you for the interview.
Anytime. My guest today, all the way from North Carolina, it is the founder of Koloff for Christ Ministries, Wrestling Hall of Famer, might I add as well, multi-time champion in the NWA, the Russian Nightmare, Nikita Koloff, also an author. What haven't you done? What haven't you done?
Stu, you know what? It's just been a pleasure just to be with you on your show, and thank you for that. Thank you for that plug. I mean, I'm just fortunate and grateful to be a part of the wrestling world, and now to be on your show.
No problem. It's been an honor having you on the show. This is why I do the show. It just I love it. I love hearing the stories, and it's great getting insight into what you've been doing outside the wrestling for many years.
Absolutely. People can just go to Koloff.net, Koloff.net. It's a one-stop shop. They can connect with me on my podcast, for the Man Up Camp, everything I'm doing, social media, right there, Koloff.net.
Lovely. Thank you very much. A big thank you to Powered 4 TV for putting the episodes up on the on-demand service there. Big thank you to John Scott and Rich Crowhurst for all the support. Really appreciate it week in, week out. Nothing's ever a problem. Also, we're doing Powered 4 TV Big Fight Weekly, the MMA and boxing show with my cousin Rich and John have put on these first. It's been fantastic with that. Thank you to Chris Dutton again, as always, for the superb editing. I couldn't do this without him, and fantastic job once again. Thank you to Mike Angus for the intro, as always, to the show. You can find the Stu's Wrestling Podcast merch at WrestleMerchCentral.com. There is loads of stuff, lots of different items that you can get. Mugs, hats, face coverings, t-shirts, hoodies, even the new varsity jacket with embroidered Stu's Wrestling Podcast logo on it. Big thank you once again to Dean and the team for listing my products on there. Great work, and we will see you soon for the next episode of Stu's Wrestling Podcast.